Grandma, stop talking! The hospital room went silent. 4 family members froze as 80-year-old Elizabeth Benson pulled a faded photograph from under her pillow, her trembling hand reaching for Charlotte. The monitors beeped their steady warning. Charlotte, her only black granddaughter in a white family, leaned closer. "You're not a Benson, sweetheart." Elizabeth's voice cracked. 23 years ago, I switched you. There's a girl named Hannah. She has your life." Charlotte's hand slipped from her grandmother's grip. But here's what nobody expected. This wasn't a story about a racist. This was about a terrified grandmother, 2 stolen identities, and an impossible choice that would destroy 2 families before forcing them to redefine what family even means. Now, how did one woman's split-second decision in a hospital nursery create a lie that lasted 2 decades? Stay with us, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about nature versus nurture. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if this story moves you, hit that subscribe button. Now, let's go back to where it all started. The storm hit Mercy General Hospital at 2:47 a.m., and by 3:15, the backup generators were failing. Elizabeth Benson stood in the nursery hallway, her nurse's uniform damp with sweat, watching the chaos unfold through the observation window. 2 babies had been born within minutes of each other, both girls, both healthy, both screaming their lungs out in the flickering emergency lights. She'd been a labor and delivery nurse for 32 years. She knew protocol, she knew the rules, but she also knew her son. David Benson was waiting in room 304 with his wife Jennifer, both of them exhausted and elated, ready to meet their first child. Elizabeth had seen the joy on their faces when the doctor announced, "It's a girl." What she hadn't seen, what they couldn't see yet, was that their daughter had brown skin. The other baby, born to Maya Richardson in room 309, was white. Maya was a single mother, 22 years old, with no family in the waiting room and a discharge plan that listed a 1-bedroom apartment in the south end of town. Elizabeth's hands shook as she checked the plastic bracelets. Baby girl Benson, baby girl Richardson. The power flickered again, plunging the hallway into darkness for 3 long seconds. When the lights stuttered back on, she was already moving. She told herself it was Mercy. David and Jennifer lived in Thornhill Estates, where the Homeowners Association had concerns about diversity. She'd heard her son's friends make jokes at Christmas dinner. She'd watched Jennifer's mother clutch her pearls when the topic of adoption came up. How could she send a black baby into that world? And how could she watch her granddaughter grow up feeling like a mistake in her own family? The Richardson baby would be fine with Maya. Maya was strong. Maya would love her. And the Benson baby, Charlotte, they'd already chosen the name. Charlotte would have everything. Private schools, college funds, a life without questions. Elizabeth's fingers worked quickly, switching the tiny plastic bands in the dim light. Baby girl Richardson became baby girl Benson. Baby girl Benson became baby girl Richardson. It took less than 30 seconds. She walked into room 304 first, carrying the white baby wrapped in pink. "Here's your daughter," she whispered, placing the infant in Jennifer's arms. The new mother's face flooded with relief and love. Then she walked into room 309, where Maya Richardson waited alone, and placed the brown-skinned baby against her chest. "She's beautiful," Maya breathed, tears streaming down her face. Elizabeth Benson left the hospital that morning and never worked another shift. She told everyone she was retiring early. She told herself she'd done the right thing. She told herself that lie for 23 years. Charlotte Benson learned to read a room before she learned to read books. By age 5, she understood that when her grandmother Elizabeth visited, certain conversations stopped. By age 8, she knew that family photos required good lighting and careful angles. By age 12, she'd perfected the art of making herself smaller at her parents' country club events. She was the only black face in every Benson family portrait, and nobody ever said a word about it. Her parents had an explanation, of course. They'd practiced it until it sounded natural. "You're adopted, sweetheart. We chose you. That makes you extra special." Jennifer would smile when she said it, her hand smoothing Charlotte's thick curls that never quite cooperated with the ribbons and bows her mother preferred. Charlotte believed them because what else could she believe? The adoption papers were in a safety deposit box. The story was airtight. She was their miracle baby, chosen with love, and if sometimes her mother's friends asked intrusive questions at garden parties, well, that was just ignorance. That's what her father David always said. Rise above it, Charlotte. You're a Benson. But there were clues, small fractures in the foundation that she'd learned to step over, like the way Elizabeth never looked directly at her during birthday parties, always watching from the corner with an expression Charlotte couldn't name. Guilt? Sadness? She'd assumed it was just old age, or the medical history forms at every doctor's appointment. Family history unknown, her mother would write in neat cursive. And Charlotte would feel that familiar hollow ache. No genetic roadmap, no ancestral health patterns, just blank spaces where her biology should be. Or the summer she turned 16 and asked about connecting with her birth mother. Her father's face had gone white. That's not possible, he'd said too quickly. The adoption was closed, completely sealed. It's better this way, Charlotte. Trust me. She'd trusted him. She'd trusted all of them. The worst clue was the one she'd ignored the longest. Every time she walked into a room at Thornhill Estates, conversations shifted. Her parents' friends would pivot from whatever they'd been discussing to ask her about school, about tennis, about anything safe and surface level. She'd convinced herself it was normal, that all teenagers felt like outsiders in their own families. But sometimes, and late at night, she'd stare at her reflection and wonder why her nose didn't match her mother's, why her laugh didn't sound like her father's, why her skin told a story that nobody in her family could explain. She'd been living in a house built on a lie, and everyone knew it except her, until the day Elizabeth Benson decided dying with the truth was worse than living with it. Charlotte sat in her car outside Mercy General Hospital for 2 hours after Elizabeth died, the faded photograph still clutched in her hand. 2 babies in plastic bassinets, 2 tiny bracelets, 2 families who had no idea their entire lives were fiction. Her grandmother's last words kept looping in her head. Hannah Marie Richardson, born the same night as you. Maya Richardson was her mother, your mother. I'm so sorry, Charlotte. I'm so sorry. Sorry didn't bring back 23 years. Charlotte's hands shook as she opened Instagram on her phone. She typed the name slowly, like the letters might explode. Hannah Richardson. The search results loaded, and her breath caught. There were dozens of Hannah Richardsons, hundreds maybe, but only one was 23 years old, and living 200 miles away in the same city where Mercy General Hospital still stood. Only one had a profile picture that made Charlotte's stomach drop. Hannah Richardson was white, blonde hair, blue eyes, the kind of effortless beauty that belonged in her parents' country club, not in Charlotte's stolen life. Her bio read, social work grad student, coffee addict, raised by the strongest woman I know. Charlotte scrolled through the photos with trembling fingers. Hannah at graduation in a cap and gown, her arm around a black woman who had to be Maya Richardson, Charlotte's biological mother. Hannah at a family barbecue, surrounded by faces that looked nothing like hers, but smiled like they belonged together. Hannah volunteering at a community center, Hannah laughing with friends, and Hannah living the life that was supposed to be Charlotte's. Except it wasn't supposed to be Charlotte's, was it? Because Charlotte had been raised in Thornhill Estates with private tutors and trust funds, while Hannah had grown up in a 1-bedroom apartment with a single mother who worked 2 jobs. The math was brutal. Elizabeth had switched them because she couldn't bear to see a black baby raised in a white family. So she'd sent Charlotte to Maya and given Hannah to the Bensons, except she'd gotten it backwards. She'd created the exact situation she was trying to prevent, just in reverse. Charlotte clicked on Hannah's most recent post. It was from 3 days ago, a photo of Maya Richardson in a hospital bed, Hannah holding her hand. The caption read, "Mom's getting her chemo port placed today. She's the bravest person I know. Send good vibes. Chemo, cancer." The biological mother Charlotte never knew was dying, and the sister, no, not sister, the stranger, who'd lived her life was watching it happen. Charlotte's finger hovered over the message button. What do you say to someone who's been living your life? What do you say to the girl who got your family by mistake? She typed 4 words and hit send before she could stop herself. We need to talk. The diner was called Rosie's, a neutral halfway point between 2 lives that should never have been separated. Charlotte arrived first, sliding into a corner booth where she could watch the door. Her coffee went cold while she rehearsed opening lines that all sounded insane. "Hi, I'm the black daughter your white family was supposed to raise. Your grandmother switched us because she was a racist who thought she was being kind. We're not sisters, but we're the closest thing to it." None of them worked. The bell above the door chimed at exactly 2 p.m., and Charlotte knew immediately which person was Hannah. Not because of the blonde hair or the blue eyes, but because Hannah stopped dead in the doorway, staring at Charlotte with the same expression Charlotte saw in her own mirror every morning, the look of someone who'd never quite fit. Hannah walked over slowly, like she was approaching a ghost. She slid into the booth without taking off her jacket. For 30 seconds, neither of them spoke. They just stared. "You have my mother's eyes," Hannah finally whispered. "Jennifer's eyes. I've seen them in every family photo, and I never understood why I didn't—" Her voice cracked. "You have her eyes." Charlotte's throat tightened. "And you have Maya's smile. I saw it in your Instagram photos. She's sick?" "Stage 3 breast cancer." Hannah's hands twisted around her coffee mug. "She's fighting, but—" She stopped, shaking her head. "I got your message the same day I found out. I thought it was a scam. And then I looked at your profile and I saw your parents, my parents, and I knew." "How did you know?" "Because I've spent 23 years being the white girl in a black family, and everyone always said I was adopted. But my mom swore I wasn't. She had the birth certificate, she had the hospital records. But I never looked like her, never sounded like her, never—" Hannah's voice broke completely. "I loved her anyway. I love her. She's my mom. But God, Charlotte, I always knew something was wrong." Charlotte reached across the table, her brown hand covering Hannah's white one. "I felt it too, every single day." They sat like that, two strangers connected by a crime they didn't commit, mourning lives they never got to live. Around them, the diner buzzed with normal conversations, people ordering pie, complaining about traffic, and living lives that made sense. "What do we do now?" Hannah asked. Charlotte thought about her parents in Thornhill Estates, probably wondering where she'd disappeared to after the funeral. She thought about Maya Richardson fighting cancer 200 miles away, not knowing her biological daughter was sitting in a diner trying to figure out how to unmake a 23-year-old lie. "I think," Charlotte said slowly, "we tell them the truth. All of them." Hannah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Together?" "Together." Jennifer Benson dropped the teacup when Charlotte said the words. It shattered against the marble floor of the Thornhill Estates kitchen, porcelain scattering like shrapnel. David stood frozen by the window, his face drained of all color. "That's impossible," Jennifer whispered. "You're adopted. We have papers. We have—" "You have lies." Charlotte's voice was steady, but her hands shook as she placed the faded hospital photograph on the granite countertop. "Elizabeth switched us, the night of the storm. She was the nurse on duty, and she decided a black baby didn't belong in this house." David turned from the window, his lawyer instincts kicking in. "Charlotte, this is insane. My mother would never—" "Your mother confessed on her deathbed." Charlotte slid her phone across the counter, Hannah's Instagram profile glowing on the screen. "Ah, that's Hannah Richardson. She's 23. Born the same night as me at Mercy General, and she looks exactly like you, Dad." Jennifer's hand flew to her mouth. She stared at the photo of Hannah, the blonde hair, the blue eyes, the sharp Benson jawline that Charlotte had never inherited. "Oh my God." "She's your biological daughter," Charlotte continued, her voice cracking now. "And Maya Richardson, the woman dying of cancer 200 miles away, is mine. Elizabeth switched the bracelets because she thought she was protecting me from your racism." The word hung in the air like poison. "We are not racist," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We raised you. We loved you." "You loved me despite what I looked like," Charlotte shot back. "Every country club event, every family photo, most every time one of your friends asked invasive questions, you made me feel like I was the problem you had to explain." Jennifer was crying now, mascara streaming down her face. "We thought you were ours. We thought—" She looked at Hannah's photo again, her finger trembling as she traced the screen. I have another daughter. I have a daughter I've never met. And I have a mother who's dying, Charlotte said, her own tears finally breaking through. A mother I never got to know because your mother decided my skin color was more important than the truth. David sank into a chair, his head in his hands. What do you want from us, Charlotte? It was the first time he'd asked her what she wanted instead of telling her what she should do. The first time he'd treated her like someone with agency instead of a problem to be managed. I want you to meet Hannah, Charlotte said quietly. I want you to help me find Maya, and I want you to admit that your mother didn't save me. She stole from both of us. Jennifer nodded, still staring at the photo of the daughter she'd never held. When can we meet her? Tomorrow, Charlotte said, if you're ready to face what you lost. Charlotte found the letter 3 days after the funeral, tucked inside Elizabeth's Bible between the books of Ruth and Esther. The envelope was addressed in shaking handwriting. To Charlotte, open only after I'm gone. She sat on her grandmother's bed in the empty house, Hannah beside her, and opened it with trembling fingers. The letter was dated 2 weeks before Elizabeth's final hospital admission. She'd known she was dying. She'd known she'd have to explain. My dearest Charlotte, it began, and Charlotte's vision blurred immediately. By now you know what I did. You know about Hannah, about Maya, about the night I made a choice that wasn't mine to make. You probably hate me. You should hate me. But before you decide who I was, let me tell you why I became her. I switched you because I was a coward. The night you were born, when I stood in that nursery and I saw your beautiful brown skin, and the first thing I felt wasn't love, it was fear. Fear of what my son would say. Fear of what Jennifer's family would do. Fear of what Thornhill Estates would whisper behind closed doors. I'd watched David grow up in that world. I'd heard the jokes at dinner tables, seen the way his friends talked about those people like they weren't human. I'd stayed silent every single time, because that's what you did in families like ours. You kept the peace, you protected the image, you pretended everything was fine. And then there you were, perfect and innocent and black. And I knew, God help me, I knew that if I sent you home with David and Jennifer, you'd spend your whole life trying to prove you belonged. You'd be the exception they pointed to, and the good one they used to justify their prejudice. You'd grow up in a house that loved you but couldn't see you. So I switched you with Hannah. I told myself I was being merciful. I told myself Maya would love you better, that a black mother could give you something my family never could, the freedom to just exist without explanation. But I was wrong, Charlotte. I was so wrong. I didn't save you from racism. I just made sure you experienced it somewhere else. And I stole from all of you, from Hannah, from both mothers who deserved to raise their own daughters. I thought I was choosing the lesser evil. But there was no lesser evil. There was only evil, and I committed it with my own hands. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that every day for 23 years, I lived with what I'd done. I watched you grow up in photos Maya sent me. Yes, I tracked her down. I watched from a distance like the coward I was, and I saw the life you built despite me. You deserved better than the choice I made. You deserved the truth. I'm sorry I waited until I was dying to give it to you. Love, Grandma Elizabeth. Charlotte's hands shook as she lowered the letter. Hannah was crying silently beside her. She knew, Hannah whispered. She knew the whole time, and she just watched. Charlotte folded the letter carefully, her heart breaking and hardening simultaneously. She was right about one thing. What? I do hate her. Charlotte's voice was hollow. And I don't know if I'll ever stop. Hannah stood in front of the mirror in her childhood bedroom, staring at a face that suddenly belonged to strangers. The Benson family photo sat on her dresser now. David and Jennifer had given it to her at their first meeting, their eyes red from crying, their hands reaching for her like she might disappear. She looked exactly like them, the same blonde hair as Jennifer, the same sharp jawline as David, the same pale skin that had made her a ghost in every family gathering, every church service, every neighborhood barbecue where she was the only white face in a sea of brown ones. You okay in there? Maya's voice came through the door, weak but steady. She'd been home from the hospital for 3 days, the chemo port still fresh under her collarbone. Yeah, Mom, I'm fine. The word Mom felt different now, heavier. Like she had to choose whether it still meant what it used to mean. Maya opened the door anyway, leaning against the frame. She'd lost weight, her headscarf wrapped tight against the hair loss she refused to acknowledge. "You're not fine. You haven't been fine since you met them." Hannah turned from the mirror. "They want me to come to Thornhill Estates next weekend. Family dinner. They said—" Her voice cracked. "They said they want to introduce me to my grandparents. Jennifer's parents. My biological grandparents." Maya nodded slowly, her face unreadable. "And you want to go?" "I don't know what I want." Hannah sank onto the bed, her head in her hands. "I look at them, and I see myself. For the first time in my life, I look like my family. Do you know what that feels like? To finally make sense?" "Yes," Maya said quietly. "I do." Because I looked at you every day for 23 years and loved you anyway." The words hit like a slap. "That's not what I meant." "I know what you meant, baby." Maya sat beside her, taking Hannah's hand. "You're wondering if you've been living the wrong life, if you're supposed to be a Benson instead of a Richardson, if the DNA matters more than the years." Hannah's tears came fast and hard. "I don't want to hurt you, but they're my parents. Biologically, they're my parents, and I never got to know them. I never got to be their daughter." "You're right," Maya said, and Hannah's head snapped up in surprise. "You never got to be their daughter, but you got to be mine. And that's not nothing, Hannah. That's 23 years of love that Elizabeth Benson stole from them and gave to me." "So what do I do?" Hannah whispered. "Oh, how do I choose?" Maya squeezed her hand, her grip still strong despite the cancer eating away at her. "You don't choose. You expand. You go to that dinner. You meet those grandparents. You let yourself be a Benson if that's what you need." "And what about being a Richardson?" Maya smiled, sad and knowing. "Baby, you've been a Richardson your whole life. That doesn't disappear because you found out where you came from. Identity isn't just blood. It's every choice you've made, every person who shaped you, every moment that built who you are." Hannah looked at the Benson family photo again, then at Maya's face, the only mother she'd ever known, dying slowly while Hannah figured out who she was supposed to be. "I'm going to the dinner," Hannah said finally, "but I'm bringing you with me." Maya's eyebrows rose. "Oh, you sure about that?" "No," Hannah admitted. "But I'm sure that I'm not choosing between families. I'm making them both mine." The lawyer's office smelled like leather and old money, the kind of place where problems got solved quietly and expensively. Charlotte sat between David and Jennifer, while Hannah sat across the conference table with Maya, who'd insisted on coming despite the chemo exhaustion that made her hands shake. Attorney Marcus Webb spread the documents across the mahogany surface like evidence at a crime scene: birth certificates, hospital records, DNA test results that confirmed what they all already knew. "This is unprecedented," Webb said, adjusting his glasses. "I've handled adoption fraud, paternity disputes, even cases of hospital negligence. But a deliberate switch by a nurse who's now deceased? This is legally and ethically complex." "Can we fix it?" David asked, his voice tight. Can we correct the birth certificates?" Webb nodded slowly. "Yes, but it requires court orders, amended certificates, and a legal acknowledgement that Elizabeth Benson committed fraud. It also means both families will need to consent to the changes." "We consent," Jennifer said immediately, reaching across the table toward Hannah. "We want her name corrected. We want the record to show that I'm your daughter," Hannah finished quietly, "and Charlotte is Maya's." Maya spoke for the first time, her voice hoarse. "What about medical history? Charlotte's been living with the wrong genetic information her entire life. What if she needed a transplant? What if there's a family history she doesn't know about?" Webb's expression darkened. "That's the most dangerous aspect of this case. Charlotte's medical records list the Benson family history, heart disease, diabetes, cancer markers. None of that is actually hers." Charlotte felt the room tilt. "What's my real medical history?" Maya pulled out a folder, her hands trembling as she slid it across the table. "Sickle cell trait. It's in my family. You should have been tested as an infant. You should have known." The words hung in the air like a diagnosis. Charlotte had spent 23 years with the wrong medical roadmap, making decisions based on genetics that weren't hers. Every doctor's appointment, every health screening, every assumption about her future, all of it built on Elizabeth's lie. "And Hannah?" Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. "Benson family history," David said, pulling out his own folder. "My father died of a heart attack at 52. My uncle had colon cancer. Hannah should have been getting cardiac screening starting at 30. Hannah's face went pale. "I'm 23. I have 7 years to start monitoring," Webb interrupted gently, "which is why correcting these records isn't just about identity, it's about survival." Charlotte looked at Hannah across the table, both of them suddenly aware of how much Elizabeth's choice had stolen. Not just families, not just childhoods, but futures, medical knowledge, the ability to protect themselves from genetic time bombs they didn't know were ticking. "How long will the legal process take?" Charlotte asked. 6 to 8 months for the birth certificates, Webb said. "But I can expedite the medical record corrections. Those are life and death." Maya leaned forward, her eyes fierce despite her weakness. And what about justice? Elizabeth Benson committed a crime. She's dead, but the hospital isn't," David finished. "Mercy General had protocols. They failed. Someone needs to be held accountable." Webb nodded. "I can file a civil suit against the hospital for negligence. It won't bring back the years, but it might prevent this from happening to someone else." Charlotte and Hannah locked eyes across the table. 2 lives stolen, 2 families shattered, and a legal system trying to put together pieces that would never quite fit the same way again. "File it," Charlotte said. Hannah nodded. "File everything." The Sunday dinner table at Maya's apartment was too small for 8 people, but they made it work. Charlotte squeezed between Maya and Jennifer, while Hannah sat across from her, flanked by David and Maya's sister Keisha. The mismatched chairs and borrowed folding table made the whole scene look temporary, like a truce that might collapse at any moment. But the food was real. Maya had insisted on cooking despite the chemo exhaustion, and the table overflowed with her famous mac and cheese, Jennifer's attempt at cornbread, and David's store-bought rotisserie chicken that nobody mentioned came from a grocery chain. "This is weird, right?" Hannah said suddenly, breaking the awkward silence. "We can all admit this is the weirdest dinner party in human history?" Charlotte snorted into her sweet tea. Maya started laughing, which turned into coughing, which made Jennifer reach over with a napkin like she'd been doing it for years. David and Keisha exchanged a look that said they were both wondering how they'd ended up here. "Weirdest and most overdue," Maya said when she caught her breath. She looked at Jennifer, really looked at her, and something passed between them. 2 mothers who'd raised each other's daughters, and somehow both done it right. "Your girl is brilliant, by the way. Social work degree with honors. You should be proud." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "I am. I just wish I'd—" Her voice broke. "I wish I'd been there." "You're here now," Hannah said quietly, reaching across the table to take Jennifer's hand. Then she reached for Maya's with her other hand. "You're both here." Charlotte watched the gesture and felt something crack open in her chest. She'd spent weeks being angry. At Elizabeth, at the Bensons, at the universe for dealing her a hand she never asked for. But sitting here, wedged between 2 mothers who both had pieces of her story, she realized anger wasn't the only option. "I want to propose something," Charlotte said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I don't think we can fix what Elizabeth broke. We can't get back the years, but maybe we don't have to choose between families. Maybe we just expand." "Expand how?" David asked, his lawyer brain already working through logistics. "Sunday dinners," Charlotte said. "Every week, both families. We learn each other. We figure out how to be—" She gestured at the crowded table, the mismatched people, the impossible situation. "Whatever this is," Maya raised her glass of water, her hand shaking slightly. "To chosen family, because biology might be destiny, but love is a choice." Jennifer raised hers next. "To second chances." Hannah and Charlotte lifted their glasses simultaneously, their eyes meeting across the table. 2 women who should have been strangers, who'd been robbed of being sisters, who were now something else entirely, something that didn't have a name yet. "To expanding the circle," they said together. The glasses clinked, the sound fragile and hopeful in Maya's tiny apartment. Around the table, 8 people who'd been torn apart by one woman's fear began the slow work of stitching themselves back together. It wouldn't be easy. There would be hard conversations ahead, legal battles to fight, medical histories to untangle, and grief that wouldn't disappear just because they decided to share a meal. But for now, on this Sunday evening with too many people crowded around too small a table, they chose each other. Not because they had to, not because biology demanded it, but because after 23 years of living a lie, the truth was finally simple. Family wasn't about who raised you or who you looked like. It was about who showed up, who stayed, who chose to love you anyway. And at this table, everyone had chosen to stay. 6 months later, the birth certificates were corrected. Charlotte Benson became Charlotte Richardson on paper, and Hannah Richardson became Hannah Benson. But neither of them changed the names they'd been called their whole lives. Some identities, they decided, were built by years, not documents. Maya's cancer went into remission, and the Sunday dinners continued. And when the civil suit against Mercy General Hospital settled, both families donated the money to a foundation that ensures proper hospital protocols and prevents infant switches. Elizabeth Benson's grave sits in Thornhill Estates Cemetery. Charlotte visits sometimes, though she's never sure what to say. Hannah leaves flowers twice a year, once on Elizabeth's birthday, once on the anniversary of the switch. Not because she's forgiven her, but because forgiveness isn't always the point. The point is choosing what comes next. This story asks an impossible question. If love was built on a lie, was it ever real? Charlotte and Hannah proved that the answer is yes, because real love isn't about how it starts. It's about who stays when the truth comes out. What would you do if you discovered your entire identity was switched at birth? Would you choose your biological family or the one that raised you? Let us know in the comments below. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because every week we bring you true stories about impossible choices, hidden secrets, and the families that survive them. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that family isn't just blood, it's choice, it's love, and it's showing up even when everything falls apart. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.